Hey, what's up, guys? My name is Cameron Gallagher, and today I'm going to be talking about an interview setup that I see very often and a style of interview setup that I see very often that I recreated last weekend, shooting some students from an organization, kind of talking about stuff about them. So, if you haven't seen this type of interview, it's like this centered interview, a little bit wider than normal, and basically it's usually dead on, and the person's like looking right to camera or slightly above camera, which, like in this case, it's slightly above. Yeah, so I kind of wanted to talk about how I lit this scene, maybe what I would do differently, and then some little tips and tricks as well as some of the gear I used. Um, yeah. So the first thing is we were in a hotel room, which of course notoriously hotel rooms are super ugly. Thankfully we were in one of like the suites, so it was like one of the larger hotel rooms. So we had a little bit of extra room than we normally would. So what I did was I noticed that this couch and the painting and then the two lamps were kind of like the basis for the practicals. Now, these were a little bit warmer than I probably would have wanted. I mean, I like them being warmer, contrasting, obviously, the perfect white balance on the skin. So in a perfect world, I probably would have replaced these bulbs with something like, I mean, I'm assuming these look warmer than 3200, to be honest with you. But you know, it is what it is. Or maybe I would add gel to this light, but you know, that's whatever. So really the basic layout of this setup is a one spotlight, really, really refined on just them. And then obviously using the two practicals in the background to create some depth. And then there's also a kicker just kind of hitting them on the side. Yeah, so I'm going to jump into some behind the scenes photos I have pulled up. I'm going to grab them. So this is what the hotel room looked like. Again, it's like one of the little kitchenette ones over here, and you can kind of see what we got going on. So the first thing I knew that I wanted to do was obviously I set up the chair and I centered everything. We had to move that over. And one of the first things that we noticed, of course, I'm using C-stands for most everything except this light we'll get into in a minute. And the main light is the Aperture 300D, and that's using the Glow Parapop softbox with a grid on it. Now, the key thing is using a grid, and we're high up, but we're frontal light still. So it's still what's considered beauty lighting. So if I move these pictures over here, which we'll get into in a minute, you can really see that this is like what your typical beauty lighting is. Now, in this scenario, I should have probably had some more fill, but I didn't have enough stuff with me that I normally do, so I didn't really have enough fill to kick back just a little bit. But I actually did just get a product from a company to check out that is exactly that, so maybe I'll use that next time. But yeah, so the key thing is this 300D, this was on full brightness too, because what I wanted to do was to really lose the background as much as possible. I wanted to be so much on them. And of course, I mean, you can see when you're looking at it, you know, these are still fairly bright, these lamps. Obviously, they're meant to light a room. So in this case, obviously, I blasted that 300D, so it would just kind of make everything darker in the background. Yeah. So again, it's kind of right above. It's on a C-stand. It's propped up directly above, a little bit facing down, a little bit of an angle. And the thing that became immediate was that back on this picture frame, we could see it was like a reflection of the softbox, and you can almost see a little bit of it right in that corner in this picture. So the key thing is that I didn't have a flag. I don't have a flag kit, and I forgot it. And usually I just use like the black poster board, and I'll just chuck it up there. We didn't have any, so thankfully there was a Rite Aid right down literally right next to the hotel. So we just popped out, grabbed one of those, chucked it up there, and boom. And that's one thing that's really important about interview setups or any type of setups. It's these little nuances like that make a huge difference. Because if there was a big glaring shadow up in here, it would really take away from this this entire shot. And it's those little things that you really want to keep in mind when you're doing these types of interview setups or shooting in general. It's the small little things that make a huge, huge difference. Now, of course, the biggest thing is in this type of scenario, you want to keep as much depth as possible. So, of course, we tried to keep as much as we possibly could. Yeah, and then so that's the key light, which is the main light. And then right over here on a little stand is actually a Luxley cello. Now, these I was sent by Luxley to check out. They obviously didn't pay me or anything, But I've been testing these out, and I'm going to have a video on that coming soon, so be sure to check those out, because these are RGB lights. And what this let me do, and of course this one's battery powered, which was even better. So the cool thing is I didn't have to plug in another light over here, which was awesome. And these were RGB, so what was kind of cool is I knew that these backlights were warmer than I was going to want. So what I did was I actually warmed up that kicker light so it was really, really warm, almost matching these backlights. Again, with more of like a reddishy hue, so it kicks nicely, but it doesn't feel too weird. In a perfect world, I probably would have put the light and boomed it over top, behind, and then hit the back of her head like that. But, you know, it is what it is, and you can only do so much in so little time. This was kind of pressed for time. But yeah, so this is kind of the basic setup. You can see, again, it's just a 300D and the little cello kicking the whole thing, and the rest of it is just modifying. So one of the other key things about this, I'm going to get rid of that, and you can kind of see here, this was a little bit easier to see of our setup. So I was probably about 4 feet, which I know it's kind of hard to see in this picture, but the camera is about 4 feet away. And one of the key things to this type of interview setup, and I think you can see it, yeah, is sort of the camera angle and the camera lens and stuff like that. Reason being is you want them to feel grand. You want them to feel very centered and feel kind of grand. Actually, if I go to, I'm going to jump over to a different one. So you can see in, so you can actually see in particular, so this guy right here, he's actually very, very tall. He is, if I'm not mistaken, 6'5", so he's very tall. So what the cool thing was, we set the setup up for him, and then when the rest of them got in frame, they were smaller, obviously, so like one of the girls was much shorter, so they kind of get like in the middle here, which is cool. And what I'm actually doing on this is I'm actually shooting on the GH5 with a Metabone Speed Booster, the XL version. And I'm on the Sigma 18-35 at 35 millimeters. I may have even been like 30 millimeters. I don't remember exactly, but it was somewhere in between that. Personally, I would say if you're in between the 28 to 35 mark, depending on your sensor size and stuff like that, is like perfect. And what it did was it made them feel grand. You know, their presence feels large in the frame, yet they feel centered and kind of, it's a nice separation type thing. You get the scope of where they are, and then them being dead centered kind of made an interesting, again, it's just an interesting different look than your typical like sideways type thing. So like I think one of the girls right here, so yeah, so she's a little bit shorter, so I mean obviously she's like kind of sitting up there, but you can kind of see that she like floats back in it, but it looks cool. It has a really nice look to it. And again, it's just like a really modern way I see of doing these interviews. Now, the tricky part is the height of the camera. You really want this to be head height or neck height. So, for instance, in the taller kid's case, it was taller, or it was slightly lower. But it didn't really matter that much because it was pretty close. And then I don't actually have one of the, like there's the teleprompters where you can like look through it and see the person behind the camera. I didn't have that, which that would have been nice. But the cool thing that worked in this case was I basically just had them look right above the camera where I was. And it doesn't look too weird. Like it fits, and I think it works well with the piece. So I don't think it like takes away from it at all. But yeah, it's really, really a simple setup. It's really nothing too crazy. You're really just making sure that your subject is dead center in the frame and that you have a good high soft light that's, you know, giving them you know, you're getting that shadow underneath your chin. And of course you could always add like a reflector down low. It's kind of tough in this case because it is a wider shot. But yeah, the key thing is just remember that 30 to 35 millimeter lens about head height, and don't be afraid to give them a little bit of headroom. You know, you don't want them to be like squeezing the top of the frame because it looks a little weird. And yeah, and in this case, it's all about symmetry. It's creating, you know, a symmetrical image. I mean, obviously they were using this chair, so we couldn't be too much. But the idea of it's symmetry, we have two lights on either side, they're nice practicals, and, you know, don't be afraid to use practicals. I think practicals are really, really awesome in creating a cool tone to an interview and creating depth. Because if these practicals were off, this would just look like a black hole, and they just would be in something ugly. So if you're in a case where you have cool practicals or you can bring practicals, like sometimes it's nice to, like if you know you're going to be doing a bunch of interviews, if you maybe go to go to Walmart and buy a really cheap lamp or two, and you can throw them in the back of your car, and then when you get there, if the studio space is really ugly or wherever they are is really ugly, you can always chuck a lamp in the background and sort of create some depth and space. Because obviously, like if I stuck one of the Luxley cello, it would look like a filmmaking light. So in this case, it obviously works out really nicely. But yeah, so that's a really quick, just kind of cool interview setup and sort of a breakdown on it. Let me know how it goes. Let me know if you guys have any cool tips and tricks for interview lighting. I want to do a couple different kinds. I'm thinking about doing something similar to this again, but trying a little bit different of a style. But yeah, so let me know what you guys think, and thanks for watching. And I'm going to leave a link to all of the gear that I use down below, and that'll go through everything, from the lights to the stands to the camera and everything like that. So if you have some of this stuff already and you're looking for different pieces, or you're looking for other stuff, you can totally do this. And also don't forget too that just because this is higher end equipment, obviously that, this is my job. It's, I own a production company, so this is what I do. But don't let that deter you from the fact that you can pull a lot of this off for very cheap. I mean, the reality is you have a bright top light with a softbox. You can get a softbox on Amazon for like $20. You could use a can light with like one of those 4 light bulb adapters, and then put the softbox of the grid. Newer has one. It's like $30. Actually, I'll link it down below too. And you can do that overhead, and then you could just get a can light with like a red bulb or something, and then just boom, do that. So don't think that you have to have like a ridiculously expensive camera and lighting setup to do this. It's just the concept of a high softbox that is directly above the camera and is obviously not right above her, but coming down like that is really nice, really directional. I mean, it's all about the lighting modifiers, using the poster there, the trifold poster up top to just block that. So anyway, I hope you guys get something out of it. And again, check that link down below for all the stuff. And if you want to see the reviews coming for that Luxley light, I'm going to be talking about the Luxley cello and timpani, those RGB lights. They are sweet. So I'm very excited to do that review. And I also have a lot of cool other stuff coming too. I got some extra goodies that I'll be talking about soon. Anyway, guys, be sure to like, subscribe, and comment, and I'll catch you guys later.